No turning back for Turkey. Which way forward for NATO? It was midnight local time when Ankara sent its troops across the Syrian border, shrugging off calls for restraint and words of warning from allies inside the Atlantic alliance. Could it be the beginning of the end of NATO, a club of military powers born with the Cold War? We'll weigh the consequences if fellow members, for standing idle, and the consequences if they actively confront a Turkey that's taking on the same Kurds who liberated the area from ISIS. What happens now to capture jihadists and their families still in captivity in Kurdish-held territory? More broadly, how to protect the estimated 1.7 million inhabitants that are now in harm's way. As the UN Security Council convenes, we'll ask how it all came to a head so suddenly. We'll weigh the Turkish leader's reaction to EU condemnation, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's threatened to open the gates for Syrian refugees to go to Europe. And yes, we'll again revisit Sunday's telephone call between Erdogan and Donald Trump, the US president, who, confused his audience Wednesday with remarks that clearly show a personal preference for Erdogan, who's now invited next month to the White House, over those Syrian Kurds who are still hosting U.S. military advisors as we speak. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Erdogan's war. Joining us is Guillaume Lesconjayas, Associate Research Fellow at the International Relations Institute, IFRI.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. From Syria, we're also joined by Syrian Kurdish academic Madame Suleiman, coordinator for the advocacy group Hope for Afrin. Thanks for joining us. From Leicester in England, Ahmed Al-Burai, editor-at-large for Turkish broadcaster TRT World. Welcome back to the show. And from Beirut...
Thanks a lot, Francois, for having me.
And from Beirut, reporter and documentary filmmaker Sofia Amara. Your latest book, Sofia, Baghdadi, the Caliph of Terror. Thanks for joining us. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, casualties on both sides on day one. Rebel claims of two key border towns being encircled, more than 60,000 displaced. An ISIS prison, according to the Kurds, bombed by Turkish planes. Boots are on the ground, but don't call it an invasion, says Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Emerald Maxwell has more.
On foot or in pickup trucks piled high with their belongings, residents flee from bombs. Many had just a few years ago escaped the Islamic State group. Now they're under attack from Turkish forces as they continue their push into Kurdish-held northern Syria. The offensive has been widely criticized internationally, but the Turkish president has hit back, renewing his threat of letting Syrian refugees flood Europe.
If you try to label this operation as an invasion, it's very simple. We will open the gates and send 3.6 million refugees your way.
Turkey has defended its offensive as a plan to return millions of refugees to a new safe zone in northern Syria. But there are fears that as fighting intensifies, Islamic State militants could break out of prisons. A senior Kurdish official has warned that may already have happened.
One of the prisons in which the Islamic State group prisoners are kept under the control of Syrian Democratic Forces was bombed by Turkish warplanes yesterday.
Turkey's offensive began days after a pullout by US forces from the border, a decision widely criticized as an abandonment of the US-allied Syrian Kurds. The Kurds have appealed to the European Union and other NATO members to freeze their diplomatic relations with Turkey. They've also called on US President Donald Trump to help in finding a political solution, asking him to remember the sacrifice made by Kurdish forces in the fight against the Islamic State group.
Guillaume Lesconjayas, we have competing versions of what's been going on the last 24 hours militarily. What's your thoughts from what we're getting?
Well, it's really difficult. I would just start recalling that it's not the first time, actually, Turkey is heading ahead into this direction and invading, technically, what is the northern part of Syria. Even though they always claim, it dates back to the Adana process, an agreement of 1999, which actually was an agreement with Syria at that time to go over the border. Now you have several jump-offs, and they are starting again what we have already saw in the 3 or past 4 years, in 2016, in 2017, in 2018, with, I should say, various degree of ability to resolve what their strategic aim is. And I would actually say that technically it's an invasion because they cross over into Syrian territory. Which is yet still questionable is the scope and depth of this campaign.
All right, let's talk about this because the foreign minister, Mevlut Cavusoglu, has said that they will not go further than 30 kilometers across the border.
Well, it's still actually a real issue. Military talking, this ability to go in depth into Syrian territory is also subsumed by the possibility to get air power, because the Turkish forces have, since 2016, have been through a really in-depth cut of their military ability to do things after the failed coup. And what we see is that their ability for ground forces to step forward to defeat actually the YPG will be actually also endangered if they can't get enough air power. And for the moment, it's a real questionable issue.
Of how much air power they have. Manan Suleiman, when we look at this map, rebels claiming that those two border towns are surrounded. Your reaction?
My reaction, I think it's really shameful for all the humanity, for the United Nations, for the Europe, not only for the Kurds, even for Turkish people, for all the humanity. What is happening now? We know what's happened in Afrin, because it's not the first invasion of Turkish army in Syria. It has been the first one near Bab and second one in Afrin. In Afrin, it's almost destroyed. All the infrastructure destroyed completely. All the Kurdish people, they flee away to save themselves. They couldn't come back to their home. Now all these villages, homes, more than 50% of these houses attributed to terrorists with guns. You can't do anything. They are raping, they are kidnapping, they are stealing everything. Now it's the time of olive crops. And now what we can say that the mass cynic one, it's Afrin, it's attached to Atay. You have Turkish identity card, and you have a war between Aleppo and Afrin. There's no more Syrian territory. So it's lying. Erdogan, it is lying. Before all the humanity is lying, because I have a document about Turkish identity card for all the people. It is forbidden to talk in Kurdish. You have all the things. So what is happening is really shameful. So for me, it is emergency. We have to, all the humanity have to react in order to stop this madman, because it is a catastrophic thing.
Ahmed Abourai, explain to us, what is the rationale behind this invasion?
Well, if the YPG allows all the refugees who've been displaced from Al-Bu Kamal, Deir ez-Zor, Al-Hasaka, Qamishli, Tel Abyad, all the stretch of the northern Syria to go back to their own houses that the guest is speaking about have been destroyed in Afrin, Turkey would have no cause to go into the Syrian border and create this safe zone. the first thing that we should be talking about is how the YPG proved to be the other face of the same coin of the terrorist groups of Daesh, of ISIS. They've completely cleansed the indigenous people of the region. They were not very hospitable. They were not very welcomed by the people of this region. They marginalized the Arab tribes in this region. And this poses a threat to Turkey. The demographic change is not promising. It's not enough that you defeated Daesh with the help of the United States and other Western powers, that you're going to dominate the whole region and marginalize the indigenous people. That's the main problem. Then you should separate yourself from PKK. Why should you resort to the use of power, use of military arms against Turkey, and then you expect Turkey to just welcome you with a smile? None of the Western powers, none of the sovereign countries would accept a threat on its border. And all the powers in Syria, they do not have any border with Syria. It's only Turkey that is suffering from the huge, unbearable burden of the refugees, more than 3.6. So it is not an invasion. It is a kind of ending the suffering of the people and finding a solution to those. When the European Union, when the United States did not act, then Turkey was forced to unilaterally act on the ground.
Sophia Amara, your reaction?
Yeah, I think indeed it was expected. The Turkish campaign was expected, and what happened lately in Washington was clearly a green light for them to move, because for Turkey it was not possible to keep that forces, that Kurdish forces that have got stronger and stronger, fighting along with the Americans against ISIS indeed, but having them on its southern borders, it is sure that, of course, I mean, I'm not against or with it, but I mean, this is the way they think. And today the problem, I think, is not about Turkey, it's not about the civilians who are going to go through suffering again, it's about the West. What did the West do to prevent things to escalate this way? Indeed, Erdogan has 3.6 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. He has on the Syrian borders a population, a Kurdish population that grows stronger and stronger, who has been fighting against ISIS indeed, but yet who has replaced in some villages the Arab populations. So today, this is the situation. And in Washington, or even in Europe, but especially in Washington, the signals that are sent are really mixed. And this is what allowed Erdogan to go for this invasion that is not the first one anyway.
And while Erdogan's remarks warning the EU against an invasion, against using the word invasion, were unequivocal, Donald Trump's comments late Wednesday from the White House confused many. Let's take a listen.
Somebody wrote in a very, very powerful article today. They didn't help us in the Second World War. They didn't help us with Normandy, as an example. They mentioned names of different battles. They were there, but they're there to help us with their land. And that's a different thing. In addition to that, we have spent tremendous amounts of money on helping the Kurds in terms of ammunition, in terms of weapons, in terms of money, in terms of pay. With all of that being said, we like the Kurds.
We like the Kurds. Manan Suleiman.
Thanks very much for liking Kurd. I think the Kurd fighting not for themselves, for some value, to live together with Christian, with Arab, with Armenian, with Cherkess in Syria. Syria at the cradle of the humanity. If you have visited Syria, you can see what is said in Syria. There are nothing. Just one example. I think,
but it is true. It is true that the Kurdish fighters over the past couple of years have become stronger in that area. That is worrying Turkey, especially in relation to their internal fight with the PKK.
No, I think it's a first problem for me. The Kurds live there. They are from all they are their land. They are not living from 1 year, 10 years, more than 1,000 years. They are living there. They were before Turks and Arab. We know from where Turks are coming and Arabs are coming, but this is the land of Kurds. We have some mystery. It's talking about the history. It's Kurds' land. So what is happening? Just for me, one example. Sorry, if you allow me. If now in Syria, even no Christian, no progressist people, if you eliminate Kurds, what will be stay? We have choice. Europe and humanity will choose between Hezbollah with Iran and Daesh with Erdogan and Saudi Arabia. So I think it's very urgent to stop what this madman, what he's doing, what's happening. And we have many examples to show you what's...
But both sides accusing each other of supporting ISIS, or all sides, because there's more than two sides in this fight.
Oh, yeah.
Guillaume Lesconjayas, your reaction to what you just heard from Sophia Amara about the mixed messages out of Washington, is that the root of all of this?
Well, there is indeed a deep question of understanding what Erdogan's message is, but Erdogan's message can also be understood as a dual-track messaging to the EU, to NATO, to the US, to the rest of the international community. One has to understand also that Turkey is actually more or less considering this as a fait accompli, and is using more or less Donald Trump's proposal as some kind of green light.
It's not just Donald Trump. This is the NATO boss, Jens Stoltenberg, speaking in Athens a short while ago. He says he expects Turkey to show restraint and ensure their actions in northern Syria are measured and to avoid more human suffering. Is that a green light as well?
Nope, it's not, but it's really a thin red line on which NATO's is really has a lot of difficulties to walk on. Reason is actually twofold. The first one is that Turkey is one of the first members of NATO since 1952, and you have no process within NATO to expel one ally that would not comply with the rules of the international organization, meaning that as long as Turkey is an ally, Stoltenberg cannot say anything else than, well, we expect Turkey, and behind closed door there might be some discussions, quite difficult ones, but one must also recall that since the past, NATO has been helping Turkey, for instance, by deploying Patriot batteries in the last period of time. So there must be caught some kind in Schrodinger's box, where they are at the same moment calling for restraint and trying to figure out and work things out, which is
work things out. I want to get Ahmed Al-Bourai's reaction, but first we have to take a very quick break. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at Turkey embarking on the first full day of a ground offensive where it's shrugged off objections and criticisms and warnings. We're talking about it with Guillaume Lesconjayas, researcher at the French International Relations Institute, IFRI. Joining us as well, academic Madame Suleiman, coordinator for the advocacy group Hope for Afrin. Joining us from Leicester, Ahmed Al-Bourai, editor-at-large for Turkish broadcaster TRT World. And from Beirut, we're in the company of reporter and filmmaker Sophia Amara. Your latest book, Baghdadi, the Caliph of Terror. Ahmed Al-Bourai, your reaction to the international reactions so far. Condemnation. We've had a couple of Turkish ambassadors summoned. Your thoughts on how isolated is Turkey at this point?
Well, first of all, if you consider the United States reaction, Donald Trump, when he promised to obliterate Turkey if it exceeds the border or the limits, I believe this is a kind of for domestic consumption, basically. Donald Trump understands the sensitivity of the issue. He is the one who said that he is withdrawing all the troops of the United States back early this year, almost 8 months ago. And it seems that the establishment is not on the same page with Donald Trump. But if you move to the European Union, basically, they do not have any options to Turkey to offer. They're not offering solutions. They're just producing rhetoric and naive discourse that does not help anybody. The problem is there for more than 3 years, and Turkey is asking everybody to take its responsibility with the refugees or help Turkey create a safe zone on the border with Syria, but they're not helping it. Then there is no other option but to move into Syria and impose it unilaterally when the international community is not helping. And another interesting thing is President Erdogan today was very outspoken against Saudi Arabia, who is preaching Turkey of democracy and respect of human rights, the same as Sisi of Egypt, who preach all human rights, and they violated all international laws in Yemen by Saudi Arabia by the killing of Khashoggi, and also Sisi by the killing of dissent and the crackdown on opposition. All these powers are not isolating Turkey. Turkey is respecting the international law, is doing this according to the Adana Agreement, and it's protecting its own national security.
Sophia Amara, your thoughts on what the international reaction has been so far?
I think it seems not to be aware of the dangers that goes along with this military campaign, unilateral Turkish offensive. Because today Turkey is entering that zone, is bombing, and you have there the Kurdish forces who have been fighting against ISIS, we said it already, but also you have prisoners. I just got back 2 days ago from Baghdad, Iraq, and I met with officials who are so scared to see a revival of ISIS because of all the militants and all the ISIS fighters that cross the borders between Syria and Iraq so easily till this day. And when I was there, they were about to receive from the Kurdish forces 3,000 Iraqi ISIS fighters who were supposed to be delivered to the Iraqi authorities. Today, there are around 10,000 or more very dangerous ISIS fighters who are in custody of the Kurdish forces, plus all their families. It's about 80 or 90,000 people who are all around that zone, the buffer zone that Erdogan is seeking to create. Today, a few days ago, I have met with ISIS, who were ISIS fighter who were taken by the military, the Iraqis, in custody, of course, in a prison, and they came from these camps. They are paying bribes and back to freedom.
And we're seeing on the map here that we're Sophia Amara,
security.
We're seeing on the map the town of Al Hol. You can see it there, quite near the Iraqi border, which, according to Syria's Kurds, they've bombed. The Syria's Kurds claim that they've bombed a detention center there.
I talked to them 2 hours ago with a
if you allow me to jump
Syrian Democratic Forces member.
Sorry, go ahead, Sophia, and then Ahmed.
He said he confirmed that. Yeah, he confirmed SDF member that I talked to in Kamishli told me that indeed the bombing had touched the prison, but that the ISIS fighter were still in it and that nobody managed to escape. But that's not going to be the case for the time this offensive will last. We don't know what can happen, and what I know is that some of them are already paying bribes to be freed from these camps and go back to Iraq because they're seeking to revive ISIS.
Ahmed Al-Burai?
First, Francois, the attacking of these detention facilities and the Christian community, as the YPG claimed, are going to be exposed, as President Erdogan promised today. Second, when we speak about Daesh fighters captured by the YPG, the question remains, why didn't they extradite them to their original countries to have a fair trial there? And second, is this the threatening stick that they're using to threaten the international community, that if you allow Turkey to go ahead with its operation, then the ISIS fighters will be out in the streets and will wreak havoc again? This is not going to eradicate extremism in that region. It's the existence of the YPG and the way they're dealing with the people there is going to radicalize more elements, more radical than the YPG. A very important thing to say here is Amnesty International released 2 reports a couple of years ago speaking about the crimes of the YPG that amount to war crimes, but they're not being reported in mainstream media because they're not pleasing the international powers and Western democracies. That's the hypocrisy we're facing. If you're interested in eradicating extremism, then let's deal with it on the same scale. Whether Daesh or YPG, all extremism should be eliminated, should be condemned on equal terms.
All right, Madam Suleiman, briefly.
Yeah, I think just really, I don't know how to look in Afrin. Now, is there any IPG, any PKK? Why Turkey is still there in Afrin? They are, I have a list of, they are exoding of the Kurdish population. There are no Kurds there. We have in all...
No, but let's answer this question. Let's answer this question that's been put forth by Ahmed Al-Burai. Is the detention center a bargaining chip for Syria's Kurds, as he's implying there?
No, it is not. No, I think it is right. It's not. The Kurds have fought against us. You can compare PKK or PYD or YPG Kurds with Daesh, with extremists, religious. They are killing everybody. The Kurds, what do they want?
Right.
What's the aim of the Kurds? To live with Assyrian, with Armenian, with Arab. It's an example, it's a concrete example. Look in what is happening in Qabislo, in Kobane. What is happening? Not in Turkey. They are not in prisons, they are living together, they have school, you have everything. It's much even better than in Damascus.
All right, let's finish on this point. Ahmed, let's finish first on this point.
With all due respect, PKK is listed as a terrorist organization by the European
Sir, may I respond? For you, I've listened. I have even the image of Imam. They are calling for holy war against the Kurds. For Erdogan, all the Kurds are no believer. They want to kill them in Afrin. No.
All right. I want to get back to the issue of those ISIS fighters that are in those detention centers. Late Wednesday, the U.S. president confirming the U.S. had taken custody of 2, quote, high-value IS individuals. Now, these are reportedly part of a 4-man jihadist cell that's known as the Beatles, accused of abducting and decapitating some 20 hostages, including U.S. journalist James Foley. Sofia Maha, you heard Ahmed Al-Burai talk about how the prolonged detention of foreign nationals by the Syrian Kurds can be viewed as a bargaining chip. Whose responsibility is it, the fact that these foreign fighters are still inside Syria?
Well, I don't agree with what your guest said, because first of all, of course, we cannot compare the YPG with ISIS. No, not at all. First of all. Second of all, we could reply that Turkey is using the 3.6 million Syrian refugee also as a bargain chip against Europe. This is the second to say. And last, I have asked, for example, these Iraqi forces who were about to get back 3,000 is going to happen in a week. 3,000 prisoners, 3,000 Iraqi ISIS prisoners from the Kurdish forces in Syria to Iraqi jails. the Kurdish, I mean, they're totally what? I mean, they don't have the means, they don't have the capacity to deal with this, with so many prisoners, so many data. They have to classify who is dangerous, who is less dangerous, etc., etc. And the Kurdish have been asking Europe to and the West to take their responsibilities and take back the families, take back the fighters. And even I have met Iraqi judges who are really pissed at Europe, at Belgium, at France, at Europe. Why aren't you taking your jihadis back home? Because we don't have the means. If Iraqi doesn't have the means as a real country, what about the Kurds? What about the Kurdish forces?
Guillaume Lesconjayas, on that point, is there going to be a change? Because we remember last year there was that Wall Street Journal report how the French were basically doing giving to the Iraqis French jihadis who were then being extrajudiciarily killed, executed. Are we going to see due process for these French nationals that are held in these detention centers in Syria?
Well, I wouldn't actually be able to comment on the trial issues, but what we can observe is that for the past couple of months, there has been a consistent statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs saying that those jihadists have to be actually detained and trialed.
Tried where
they were actually caught and where they actually committed their crimes. However, there have been some tendencies to modify slowly this attitude by, for instance, taking back the sons and for some instance the families and the kids, especially from these areas, especially from Iraq, telling them and actually having them back in France, where we've been trying to figure out how to better figure out their way out of radicalization.
And both
process.
in France and Belgium, it's the courts that have, in some instances, ordered the state to repatriate those families.
Yes, because from a pure, legal state of point, there are French, there are Belgium. You cannot actually, by law, create apatrides. You cannot. Therefore, you have to actually repatriate them, which actually create a lot of discussions, tension, and especially an issue because those actually that joined the caliphate actually claimed they were actually no more French, no more Belgium, no more whatever. They actually were just joining Daesh. So there is some kind of gap within our status, within our legal systems, but it's something that we should have been...
And politically, now that we have this Turkish offensive taking place, is the French state's attitude going to change?
Well, there is a place in hell for those who predict the future, especially if you're in my line of business. Therefore, I wouldn't say this. However, if something had to change, then it has to be done really, really quickly.
No, for me, I think they are the normal way to solve the problem. It's hard for everybody, for the humanity, for Iraq, for Syria, for Europe, for United States. To solve the problem, we have to have a meeting with United Nations, with European, and not to freeze them. What they are doing? They will kill, there will be bloodshed everywhere in Europe, in Turkey, even in Syria. They will kill everybody. So it's real. I can't understand. I'm scientific, so it's clear for everybody. You have to meet, to have a meeting, international meeting. It's an international problem. How we can do with this criminal? They have killed a million of people in Syria. Where is Syria now? Where is Iraq? So Turkey is not allowed to freeze them. Well, what will happen? It will be bloodshed for everybody. And now, even in Rojava, how many millions will flee their country, their land? Christian, Armenian, Kurds, where they will go? To desert, to Europe, where? And Erdogan is saying, I will bring 2 million people from Turkey to settle them in Rojava. Is their land? If you are sincere, if you are human, I don't know, if you are religious, you are a believer of something, let's meet together with other people and send them to their country in Hama, in Damascus, in Hamas, not to take other land of Kurds. So it's criminal. I can't understand how we can let this criminal and with this argument and to act and to destroy everything.
So now, what happens next? The Syrian Kurds. Are the Syrian Kurds going to now have to turn towards Damascus as a result of all this?
Sir, I think the problem it's very simple. It's easy if we are sincere. Well, Kurds are living in all their lands. We have a neighbor Christian. We have Turks. We have Arabics.
Are they going to turn towards Damascus?
No, there's a problem now. It became international problem. It has been Geneva. It has been United Nations. Everybody, I think, they should take their responsibility to solve the problem of Syria. We have a madman, the president.
Right.
He's a madman who destroyed the Syria. No, look, what stay from Syria?
Ahmed al-Burai, what happens next? Do you see then, as a result, the Syrian Kurds who will turn more towards Damascus, will turn more towards Russia?
Well, to be honest, my advice to them, if I can advise them, is they should reconsider their policy in the region. They've seen how Donald Trump, as their sincere ally, is not that sincere. He left them amidst the battlefield with no support. And now I think they're going to resort to the Syrian regime. The Syrian regime and the Russians today, Sergei Lavrov, the secretary of Russia, spoke after being silent for a couple of days. And it seems that he's on the same page with what's going on by Turkey. He wants to bring Turkey and the Syrian regime on the table. And in this case, then if this happens, then the YPG is going to lose more. So it's the only way out for them and for the whole region is to relinquish and completely give up the solution of resorting to arms and sit on the table with Turkey, with the Syrian regime, with the Russians, with the Iranians, and try to find a way out. Away from these kind of talks, the bloodshed is going to continue, and I believe it's the YPG and the civilians who are going to suffer the most.
Sophia Amara, could we be headed to some kind of breakthrough, or is it just going to get a lot bloodier?
I think we could get to a breakthrough through Moscow and Tehran, because of course the official position of Iran is to say that it's against any invasion of its ally Syria, a sovereign country. But the Russians definitely could play a role in getting the Turks and the Kurdish forces and the Syrian regime to sit at the table and try to stop the bloodshed and more suffering for the civilians.
Do you agree, Guillaume Lesconjas?
Actually, what I see there is that everything we have been actually observing in terms of US policy in this region is, in a way, enforcing Moscow's and Tehran's move. What I would actually underline is by the demise of US credibility in the area.
But you agree there could be a solution, and that solution will come, it will be driven by Moscow and Tehran? I'm
not sure, actually, what Tehran's play is going to look like. If you observe what Iran's understanding of the situation is, depending if you're with the Revolutionary Guard or with some advisor close to Rouhani, those not even share the same understanding and willingness to sort things out.
And as for Moscow?
Well, what I observe is that for the first time, Lavrov has actually stepped out of this soft tone of his by saying that what he wants is having these Damascus and Kurdish communities going together. Is that going to finish like slipping again between the SDF and Assad's regime? I don't think so for the time being. What I actually could see is the YPG, the Turkish, the Kurdish combatants will for the moment fight, and maybe also there might be some further bloodshed before it gets better.
Like Guillaume Lesconjas, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Madame Suleiman. I want to thank Ahmed al-Burai for joining us from Leicester in England and Sophia Amara in Beirut. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. We say hello to Emma James.
Hi there. Yes, a lot of very powerful images out there right now, and often it is the photographs that are the most powerful of all, because that's where you get to see the close-up of people's faces, the confusion, the fear. Now, someone who has been doing incredible work is Dalil Suleiman, who works for the Agence France Presse. He has captured a number of images which really tell the story of the 60 to 100,000 people who have been displaced already by what the Turkish are calling Operation Peace Spring. I don't know why.
No, it's working. It's good.
It is working? Oh, marvellous. That's always good to know. Yes, the images here really telling the story of the suffering, the fear and the unknown fate for these people who are fleeing for their lives. One other key concern, aside from the risk of genocide, is what will happen with all of those prisoners being held by the Kurds. Now, Donald Trump tried to address this a little in a tweet, saying that should the Kurds or Turkey lose control, the United States has already taken the two ISIS militants tied to beheadings in Syria, known as the Beatles, out of that country into a secure location. Now, I don't think that those two gentlemen are the only ones who carried out beheadings on behalf of ISIS, so I think those words won't do all that much to really make people feel more comfortable about this. Business Insider certainly won't be making anyone feel comfortable with this headline, saying that ISIS has a plan to bust out 70,000 supporters. Now, if that number sounds a little high, that's because they're actually including not only the fighters, but their wives and all of their children.
The families, yeah.
And that is 70,000 plus being held currently by the Kurds. Now, they have spoken to an unnamed NATO official who is certain that ISIS is planning a jailbreak. He said, "We know they are plotting something, but the resources to stop them just aren't available." Now, Business Insider has also spoken with somebody who was an ISIS fighter himself and is no longer, who says that while in prison, they have all maintained contact with the leadership of ISIS via WhatsApp, via Telegram, and that these are very careful people. He says they will have planned to attack at the perfect time and will have trucks and guns waiting for all the men they free. Now, that is obviously of huge concern to everyone around the world, because nobody knows what would happen should those people be free and be free to attack anywhere around the world, because we simply don't know where they have gone. There is quite a propaganda warfare underway, with both sides basically accusing the others of atrocities. The Daily Sabah, which is a Turkish newspaper, claims there was a sniper trying to target their journalist during a live broadcast. And certainly Turkish news outlets very much focusing saying that the PKK is attacking civilians in Turkey, and there have been many photographs of dead children being published online, which obviously I'm not going to show here, from both sides. So the propaganda warfare definitely being stepped up.
And there are civilian deaths on both sides.
There are civilian deaths on both sides. There's no arguing with that. Awful images of dead and severely injured children from Turkish shelling in Kamishli. No amount of Orwellian language, Operation Peace Spring or Safe Zone, can sanitise what this offensive actually is, says Richard Hall. This person saying Kurdish blood is on the hands of every isolationist Democrat or Republican. This is what your hands off Syria and US out of Syria protests have gotten us. Curse you. And there's an interesting take on this from Walid Fares, who was himself an advisor to Donald Trump up until not so long ago. And although Donald Trump clearly feels he is doing what the people of America want him to do, Walid Fares says that you can actually look at the way people ask questions in these polls. Do you want to pull the troops out of Syria? 75% say yes. But if you ask a different question, and this is a mock setup, he's not actually carried out these surveys, do you want to fight the jihadists coming after us in US cities or in Syria? Well, then 75% say it should be happening in Syria. So what he's saying is basically that Donald Trump shouldn't be believing that the Americans want the US troops pulled out of Syria no matter what.
All right, many thanks for that, Emma James. We'll continue to follow this story. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.